Hey, what's going on? It's me, that guy, that Reverend Cameron Abbott from That Nerdy Site, and I'm coming to you with this fresh new episode and original episode of That Conversational Podcast. That Conversational Podcast is kind of a product of a lot of different show ideas that we've had from That Nerdy Site that we've had kind of cooking for a while. But when we boiled it all down, each of these ideas for a show had really a single core concept, which was a single conversation about a singular topic or idea. And so because of that, we kind of mixed all of those together to kind of create a basic idea of a conversational podcast, a single topic to really kind of dive into and talk about. This week's episode is with Ian Preschel, from formerly of OK Beast, the recently sunset podcast site that inspired thousands, as well as the current runner of A+ Anime, the spinoff show from OK Beast's lineup, and also on YouTube and Twitch at Ian Why Not. So, wanted to give a little preface here because we will definitely hear us talk about OK Beast in a current context. That's because this episode was recorded a couple of weeks ago. And so that was before the news broke that OK Beast would be sunsetting and A+ Anime would be spinning off with the podcast, with its sister podcast, Piece by Piece. I mention that because Piece by Piece is a One Piece podcast that Ian runs, and One Piece happens to be the subject of our episode. Brief details about it include the fact that One Piece is a manga and anime from Japan, from one of the greatest literary minds of the Eastern canon. I will go ahead and really not go too deep into that as an introduction because we definitely go way deeper into introductions of it when we will start going, and I'd hate to keep you away from this incredible content. So thank you so much, Ian, for sitting down with me, even before we had the name of the show planned out. And to all of you listening, thank you so much for giving a shot to That Conversational Podcast, and we hope that you'll enjoy this episode and the future episodes as we continue along. And thank you, and be good and be nerdy to each other. Is that what Trevor says? But, so my name's Cameron. This is, as of yet, untitled show for That Nerdy Site. I'm joined with a wonderful guest, Ian, Why Not, from Twitter.
I do live
currently
there.
Currently under the pseudonym Glizzy McGuire.
I'm infamous for that name.
It's great. It's absolutely stupendous.
Thank you, man.
Dude, Glizzy's getting, taking off as, an internet thing is the weirdest thing, because it's just, some dumb, food name.
I mean, hey, man, the dumb things are what stick, and that's kind of what we're talking about today, right? The dumb, silly things that really people connect with.
That's true. The format of the show is kind of freeform. It's just kind of like a conversational podcast about a specific subject. And Ian, I blame two people for what I'm about to what we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
I blame you, and I blame NATO.
Oh, no.
NATO Johnston from Australia, Perth, Australia.
from
NATO
Australia,
Johnston.
from the famous podcast Australia.
Yeah, no, from Perth, Australia, the notorious citizen of Perth, Australia, who has traveled the world and made himself known to all of us. I blame the two of you for doing this. I was out, man. I was out, and I was okay being out, but then you guys got me back into it. So we're talking about One Piece.
Mm-hmm.
One Piece, which is by the time it finishes. So right now we're recording this beginning of October 2020. 2020, of course, being the year of the hellscape.
Mm-hmm.
The absolute nightmare that is this year. And we're talking about a series that literally started back in 1997. July 1997.
Mm-hmm.
Was the publication date for Eiichiro Oda's One Piece, which is just to kind of give a good little summary here from Wikipedia. The story follows the adventures of Monkey D. Luffy, a boy whose body gained the properties of rubber after unintentionally eating a devil fruit.
Mm-hmm.
With his crew of pirates named the Straw Hat Pirates, Luffy explores the Grand Line in search of the world's ultimate treasure known as One Piece, in order to become the next king of the pirates.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
We understood from, it mentions here, in August of 2020, it was announced that the series will be coming to a close relatively soon. The end is in sight. But for Oda, that could mean like in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, there's a big meme in like people that talk about One Piece where it's like, oh man, this is the year, it's gonna end here, and then like every time Oda's like, guys, we got like 3 more years left, and it's like just that sentence over and over again, like, hey, we got 3 more years, 5 more years, don't worry, it'll end eventually, and then it never will. I'm not convinced that it ever will.
You think Oda is? Do you think George R.R. Martin was inspired by Eiichiro Oda, that you can just tell people that the ending's coming and he never has to?
No, because Oda writes and George R.R. Martin doesn't. That's the only caveat. Like the cool thing about One Piece is that like it has, I think one of the special things about it is that it has like endless potential, and it has endless like sort of plot threads and story threads and ideas and stuff that you can kind of go down, which is not something that is, you know, readily apparent in almost any media. Even like with one of my favorites, like Naruto, right? I feel like there is sort of a ceiling for good ideas and good story ideas you could do. But with One Piece, the reason why it's lasting so long is that, you know, conceptually, it's just great. Like it's in that weird pocket space between like magic and anime and shonen rules where like like people aren't arguing the hard physics of stuff online. It's like it's got this weird Disney quality to it or whatever. Like it's just great. Like,
yeah. Argue me the quality. Like, argue me the physics of a rubber man and a mochi man fighting each other.
I mean, I like how I said that, and then immediately my thoughts went to like people arguing for months about power levels of different people and stuff like that. So, I mean, let me take that sentence back. People do argue about the science and power levels and stuff like that, but like in a story like Dragon Ball Z, for example, right? You have, I think, there is a ceiling to, at least for me as a reader, where things stop becoming interesting and start becoming parodies of themselves, right? Whereas with One Piece,
I mean, yeah,
it is one of the strongest concepts in all of anime and manga, just because, again, there's not a lot of hard limits for stuff. Like, how do devil fruits work? We have like maybe 2 or 3 rules that they have to follow, and sometimes even those rules are broken, right? How big is the world in One Piece? Like, yeah, we have general ideas of how big things are, but like the joke is that the ocean like sends you down the wrong path sometimes. You have no idea where you are. Like, that's, I think, one of the special qualities of the show is that things are never super, super, super hardly defined, which makes it have this crazy high ceiling for cool ideas, you know?
I agree. It's interesting because quote unquote relatively new in comparison. Like, it's a series from like, it's crazy to think about it. This series started at, like, when we were like I was like 8 when this came out in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am 30 years old. I have had so much happen in my life. I've lived through 2 recessions. I have like the number of things that like we've been through as, like, you know, growing up with this series, and it still has such a compelling, like, magic to it that is just, like you mentioned earlier, like a Disney-like quality to it that is just, like, incredible, boundless adventure. It's wonderful. So my origin with One Piece is the U.S. publication of Shonen Jump in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, One Piece immediately stuck out to me as, like, a really cool series for that. And I got, like, super into it. Like I did with every series that came out in early Shonen Jump. Like, I leapt on so hard. And, like, started reading, like, Japanese, like, fan translations of the scans from overseas. And this is back in the days when you had to, like, go into, like, an IRC chat to download mass volumes.
All right, okay.
Yeah, like, I was, like, it's like, yo, how early were you on that? It's like, well, image quality on the internet at the time still kind of sucked. So how do you get these high quality scans that people have been working on and are part of, like, these groups? You go into their IRC chat, you type in a code and a command, and you'll just automatically start downloading them from your IRC client.
Jeez.
And it was like, it was nuts. Like, that was where I was like, I need to read Naruto, I need to read Bleach, and I need to read One Piece. And because of my age at that time, like early to mid-teens, Naruto and Bleach definitely took priority.
For sure.
But now looking back though, it's like, well, One Piece just is a better, like, One Piece never has I would guess the biggest fall off for me was post Marineford, Straw Hat reuniting, getting into Dressrosa without realizing the potential that Dressrosa was going to end up having.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're like, they're at a Coliseum to get to get this devil fruit, and it's like, okay, like, these characters that they're introducing seem super, like, dumb. I don't care about them. I ended up, like, super loving them later on, but, like, that's where I fell off. So I fell off, like, and I was like, cool. I'll just wait till, like, One Piece gets way further down the line, so I don't have to wait week to week.
Mm-hmm.
Then you and Nato showed up into my life.
Oh no.
And you guys are just, like, talking nonstop about One Piece. And, like, one time I was, like, we were chatting online, and you're like, yeah, like, I've just, like, read all of One Piece,
Mm-hmm.
up to, like, where it's at right now. And I'm like,
how? That's the question that I received more than any is how did you do that? Like, what? And I do take responsibility.
Yeah, you did that without quarantine.
Yeah, okay. So
you did that without quarantine.
Yeah, okay.
That's the thing.
So what happened with me, and I tell the story all the time, but it was like serendipitous, I think, because I was transitioning from one job into doing more freelance stuff. So I ended my one job, and I was like, all right, cool. I got like 2 months to, like, kind of, I've saved up some money. I have, like, the safety net. What do I want to do? What have I been like holding back with? What do I really want to pursue during these sort of, like, 2 months off that I've been kind of wanting? And I've been talking with Nato. Nato was trying to indoctrinate me into the One Piece world, right? And my wife as well loves One Piece. So I'm like, you know what, man? Fine. I'll read the usual, like, 10 issues. And if I'm not into it, then I'm just going to, people can stop asking me. Okay. So I read 10 issues, and that was in one night. And then I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And then 10 issues turned into, like, 30. And then I woke up the next morning. I, like, did my chores around the house, and I was like, all right, I'll read some more. And then it became a tradition of, like, me just walking outside to, like, my little backyard, like, porch area in the sun, just reading One Piece, hanging out with my cat outside. And it became like a ritual. And next thing you know, a couple, like, 2-ish months goes by, 3-ish months goes by, and I'm current, So I definitely have a very fortunate stance when it comes to appreciation of One Piece, both because of how much I absorbed in one sitting, I guess. I was able to kind of see plot threads kind of happen instantaneously. I wasn't waiting from chapter to chapter. And also during that transition period, I was, like, posting about One Piece and meeting people in the One Piece community that really pointed out a lot of stuff that helped me appreciate One Piece for what it really was. People like Grant, people like, Rogers Base, tons of different people. And that's kind of what was the impetus behind creating Piece by Piece, which was kind of not even really sit down and talk with people about One Piece, more so, like, talk about people's journey with One Piece and what that means to them and why it means so much to so many people. And yeah, man, it's amazing. There's a reason why it's still around,
Yeah, it's really incredible when I sit down and think about it. Like, this really is a manga. This is a series that is a true, and I'm going to use this term, and I need to give some explanation with it. It's a true romance.
Romance Dawn.
A lot of times, Romance Dawn is the original chapter as well as the prototype of the series. For somebody who was as young as Eiichiro Oda was, when Oda was was 18, he had an understanding of the concept of romance that you really don't usually get and are taught about until you're, like, in college usually. Because romance for most of your life means kissy, lovey-dovey stories. But in reality, romance as a genre is so much larger. It's the idea of passion and ideology and individualism, like all these different, like, major themes in media throughout all these this stuff takes a precedent over important, like for example, if you read a novel about history, if it was a historical novel, they would it would talk about for example, if it's about a war, it would tell you about like the positions of the armies, the tactics they used, what the generals were thinking. But if it's a romantic novel set during that time, it can be it can basically be Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers is an incredible quote unquote romance, because it's telling a deeply emotional, engaging story about people you care about, and it's more about the feelings and the relationships that people share than it is about the overarching plot. The overarching plot of One Piece is a pirate named Monkey D. Luffy gets a crew and sails down the Grand Line. That's not even near close. That's not why people read One Piece.
Yeah.
People read One Piece for multiple reasons, but most of them come back to because you care about these characters, you care about their journey, what they've learned, what they can what they've discovered, what they've dealt with. One of the very, very incredible arcs, the Skypedia arc, is literally a story about having faith and having a belief in something that you can't necessarily prove or see, but you know in your heart to be true. And it plays into that so hard with angels and gods and all sorts of stuff. Oda really that dude really knows how to ham up a concept so hard.
Yeah, but the thing about that especially is I totally agree about the idea of hamming it up. But the thing that One Piece does is that there is a slight bit of nuance to it beyond the hamminess. There's multiple levels, and there's multiple sort of things beyond the base level story, I think, especially in Skypiea. And there's a thing kind of beyond. The thing that One Piece does that is beyond other manga, I think, is really in its craft. Kind of like what you were talking about earlier about Oda, about how he's had this idea for so long. The fact that he's been thinking about this the majority of his life kind of lends this amazing thing where it's there's a panel in the Skypiea arc, and I'm glad you mentioned it, that gives you a hint about Sanji's origins and Sanji's arc that happens in Whole Cake, which literally takes place a 10-year span, in the real world, 10 years after the Skypiea arc. The Skypiea arc, I think, happens in chapter 100 or something. It's one of the first major arcs or something.
It's the first major arc with the core Straw Hat crew.
The core people, yeah. And then
before the addition of what I consider the second
second wave.
Well, not the second wave. So after Robin joins, there's a period where you're not seeing a lot of people join very much. Frankie doesn't join until post Skypiea. He he joins right before Enos Lobby.
Yeah.
And Brooke, once again you get multiple arcs forward, then you get Brooke versus they pick up Sanji, and then actually, you know what? I think actually Sanji's probably the last of because if you actually phrase it between Old World versus New World, that's probably where it more lies into.
For sure.
So I guess that's not necessarily the case. Anyway, my
oh no, you're good. You're good. But the whole thing that I'm trying to say is that One Piece is a goofy, stupid manga about a rubber boy who eats a lot of big cartoon meat, right? But the thing that is beyond it, right, is the craft that goes into it and the amount of planning and care that Oda has for the series, right? There's a panel, and the panel that I'm describing is one of the characters in Skypiea talks about family, right? And then there's this shot where Sanji is placed very close to the camera, or to the close to the viewer in this panel, and he's smoking a cigarette. He's fully engulfed in shadow, and he says oh man, I heard that story back home, or whatever, and then he makes a comment about how, not trusting family lies, essentially. And that, again, no hyperbole, that happens within the first couple hundred chapters, and then cut to the time skip, cut to 2013 or whenever it happens. Then we get Whole Cake or whatever, or even farther than 2013.
Whole Cake was 2017.
Yeah, Whole Cake got animated in 2017, but I don't know when it got put to pages or whatever. But
well, to be fair, Whole Cake is an enormous arc in the anime.
For sure.
They definitely blow that thing up in the anime to make it,
no pun intended,
to draw it out, because they Yeah.
with the cake or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's just nutty how much care that Oda really puts into it, and like it kind of like it really is about what you said, romance, right? Romance in the multiple sort of scalars, right? Because if we separate romance, like you said, from the romantic side, right, from the relationship of like, you know, sexual or what have you, right? You have just the word like passion, care, love, like all these things that are, you know, really indicative of One Piece in many ways, right? You have the main characters love and care for each other, for the world around them, for, you know, their dreams, their hopes, their desires, right? And then you have, you know, the meta beyond that of, you know, Oda, this guy who has been a staple in like the manga world for so long, right? Really caring and putting all of his life's energy into this property, and you can really see it. And then that kind of gets put back into the story where you get this tale of someone really just being passionate and using their life's energy to do this goal no matter what it takes, right? It's weird, like it's all cyclical, you know. It's great.
No, I 100% agree. It's interesting because Oda also like when you actually like look at the guy's life, like, oh, when he's 16 he wins this like really prestigious award.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically has like been drawing like manga his entire life. And
not even just manga. He's been drawing technically One Piece his entire life.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is
like
true.
The first thing, like I think Romance Dawn was like his first unofficial project that he worked on by himself that he didn't show anybody. And then after he won that contest, he submitted Romance Dawn, which was the precursor to One Piece. And then they were like, "We love this, but just change 2 things." And then he changed 2 things, and then One Piece was One Piece. You know.
Yeah, there was, and it's interesting because there's like Romance Dawn was actually like it was a 4 like different, like there's 4 different iterations of it that would like, and it's interesting because we now find out that one of the iterations, which was a kind of compartmentalized like individual storytelling version of it, where it's like actually like not about like it's ensemble cast between like different eras and different countries and different areas. Of storytelling. But then we found out later that actually like one of those guys, Ryoma, was is part of the history of this entire island of Wano. And his story, what you saw happening in Romance Dawn, is canonical with the tales that like he lived through, and he died 50 years before the start of the series. Yep. He's like, and it's like that's such a like. And like there's other characters that are quote unquote contemporaries of him in that version of Romance Dawn that are actually like are more relative to what we see now, and it's so cool to see that like that thought process of like it could easily be like if it was a different writer, I would say, oh well, he probably looked back on that and pulled from that, but for Oda you just have to be like, actually no, he probably has like an entire profile on like Ryoma, like his entire life story from the moment he's born to the moment he dies to the moment he does stuff after he dies, which is a bit of a spoiler. But this is filled with spoilers, period. So don't feel. I probably should have prefaced that. If you want to read One Piece, you've listened to us basically for the last, I don't know, like let me look at the time here. Last 20 minutes, just like gush about this as like an incredible epic of the modern age. In my opinion, like One Piece will probably be like remembered along with like Gilgamesh and like other like great epics of storytelling, because there's nothing like it in the
period. Just in general.
In the modern canon, either Western or Eastern, I don't think there's something like this. Nope. Outside of like when I think of Oda's contemporaries, it's nothing like I feel kind of bad because it's like to me Oda's contemporaries aren't like his fellow like manga artists, except maybe Akira Toriyama. But even then, Akira Toriyama's decisions about things and his like as far as Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z goes, as far as like in the last 20 years, I think it is difficult to put him on the same level as Oda. I think just popularity-wise, he's there as far as like anime and manga are concerned. But to me, Oda's contemporaries are like J.R. Tolkien.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I feel like Eastern to Western, because like The Hobbit and everything like that is I think on the level of One Piece in terms of its like market penetration or whatever you want to call it, like the amount of movies and the amount of money it's made. I'd have to like pull up charts to confirm it, but yeah, like there is nothing like One Piece like in the modern day. Because J.R. Tolkien, when did his books come out?
His books came out in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yeah, so like
it was like his era of writing.
So like in the modern day, like there's nothing like it now. Like I guess you could argue maybe Game of Thrones is like adjacent to it or whatever, but like I would have to look again. I'd have to look at the numbers, but like between the anime, the manga, merchandise, and everything, and how long it's been out, right, and how long it's been at the top, I think it's like there is absolutely nothing like it. You know what I mean?
No, I 100% agree. I don't like. That's the thing, though. Game of Thrones has its issues and it has its problems as longevity of a series goes, and it's not even that the Game of Thrones series is because of how long it's been before that story will probably ever conclude, if it does conclude.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it gets to be on the same level.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I say J.R.R. Tolkien's stuff came out in the 20s, 30s, and 40s and 50s, I'm talking more about like between his, because the entire like Lord of the Rings universe of like the entire Middle Earth, like history of Middle Earth, was fleshed out over like a 30-year period by Tolkien between books, short stories, poems, like ballads, and like all sorts of stuff. And so it's very, actually I think it's more 40s and 50s and 60s now I think about it. I digress. But when I think about Oda's contemporaries, I think of like J.R.R. Tolkien. I think of C.S. Lewis with like, take the religious connotations out of it, but Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe as a saga, as a series, is like an incredible, like strong, like powerhouse when you talk about just Western culture and literature.
For sure.
But like those are his contemporary, the Odyssey, like Plato. Like to me, Oda's contemporaries are C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Plato. Like name any of these like authors who wrote these epic spanning stories of any sort of ideas of adventure or romance or like just anything like that. And I think he's part of that contemporaries. Now there's definitely like, and it's interesting because Eastern canon, like it's up there with Journey to, like I consider One Piece to be like, you could call it a modern Journey to the West.
For sure. Yeah. I would argue that. Yeah. Monkey D. Luffy. Right? I mean, there's definitely comparisons to be made there.
For sure. No, and like it's, when you look at, because it's crazy because not only has Oda's like his mind works so differently than other authors and other artists, and to him he's just like, hey, I really like these three actors and I have this position for these three admirals. I'm going to design the entire look of these admirals from my favorite films that these actors have been in.
For sure. But it's funny because like it's kind of like a weird life hack in a way, because if you're a character designer, like making characters, especially like in the One Piece universe, is very difficult. Like, because every character to a certain degree has this sort of like unique quality to them, which makes it, I think, easier for you to connect with them as a human being, right? Like for you to resonate with them, I guess. Like Dragon Ball Z, for example, right? Like people like Goku because of what he does, not because of how he looks, right? Like some of his designs look interesting, but I wouldn't say that that's the reason why people resonate with Dragon Ball Z. Like the character designs are weird and goofy and silly sometimes, but they do have a realistic sort of quality to them, right? And the reason why it has this realistic quality, even though it is an anime or manga, is because Oda based the majority of his characters off of real people. I mean, Sanji's based off of Steve Buscemi. You know what I mean? Like that's like a big funny sort of meme.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Steve Buscemi and Reservoir Dogs. Yeah.
And that's true for like a lot of his characters. Like I don't think Zoro or Luffy are based off of anybody, but I know for a fact that Sanji is definitely one. I know that we said before the admirals are based off of people. A lot of like villains are based off of people too. like oh my gosh, what's his name? Hulk Hogan is the reference for Whitebeard.
Yes.
And like there's like a whole like list you
with
can
the
find.
with the bandana and everything.
Yeah.
But then even like younger versions of Whitebeard that we see in flashbacks, also very Hulk Hogan looking.
Yeah, and he said as much, like, hey, these are who these characters are based off of, and here's why I liked them or whatever. And it's funny because you can kind of see his inspirations change with the era. Like I think there's a character that's based off of Eminem just because of how popular Eminem was in the time.
Oh, wasn't that the god of Skypia?
Yeah. It's Eneru is based off visually is based off of Eminem.
Eminem. That's
Eminem, so right. Like you kind of have this sort of like deep connection already. But
and it also plays into his whole being a lightning man. And like there's so many like his pun game is out of this world.
Yeah, that's like a very big Japanese thing in media. A Japanese thing in media.
I will have to say he probably pioneered The Secret before The Secret became popular, because he somehow made his in story waifu a real person. And that's a joke because he married the voice actress of Nami.
Oh yeah. And people say that he like loves Nami or whatever. Yeah, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
Good on him, man. Shout out to Oda.
Yeah, like how crazy is that? It's like, hey, I've made this character. Oh, you're voicing this character. Cool. Hey, I'm in love with you.
Yeah.
So we should get married. And they've been married for years and they have kids, and it's like some of Oda's photo, like there's a modern photo of Oda that you look at and you go, this isn't Oda. Like this can't be Oda. Like this is some old man. Oda is like, because in my mind Oda's always forever young.
Yeah, they always use they use the same photo for him with everything, where he's like got like the jet black hair. He's like he looks like he's like 22 or whatever. Like it's very funny to see that photo pop up because I know he doesn't look like that. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I almost didn't think it was him, because to me, I will always associate Oda in my mind with his snaggletooth.
Oh, okay.
That he has, like his not maybe snaggletooth's not the right word, but he had like a like it's not like I don't want to say it's like a defect. I don't want to like
canine.
harp on the guy's
you have
look.
You just have like one canine out or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he had like if he had been given like some intense headgear as a teenager, that probably would have like straightened it out, but he didn't for whatever reason. A lot of people don't do that because.
Wait, is this? I'm sorry. Expensive. I'm looking up. If you Google Eiichiro Oda's like thing on Google, it has a photo of him with like, or someone that could be him. I have no idea, with like long hair with grays in it and like facial hair. Is this him? Is this? I'm sorry. You need to confirm this.
Yeah, that's yes, that is him.
Good for him. That looks, because again, if you look on Google, if you're listening, like they always show photos of him from like when he was much younger, like when he was like I guess 18 to 20s, because he was like a prodigy I guess at the time. But to see this new photo, he looks great. Good for him. Good on you, Oda. Wow, that's so funny. Wow.
But you see what I mean? It's like that that there's like a double tooth thing going on there.
He has it's very common with a lot of Japanese people, is having like a more pronounced canine. But yeah, it's very common.
Yeah, but then he like you look at him now and it's like, oh, actually now that I'm looking at it, did he just like grow into his face?
I think
or something?
So. I think he just,
because I think that canine's still.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's like I'm looking at it now and it's like, actually I think that canine's still the same.
Maybe
he's just. Jeez, like what a guy! Like what an absolute what an absolute giga chad of a human being.
Dude, he's great. We love Oda. God Oda,
Oda's just so we as a fan of like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and a lot of other series, it's like I have to give so much like leeway to so many different like creators and authors, because. You're not at the level where everything you've made is perfect, and that's fine. I accept that. I don't expect authors or artists to be perfect. Oda just always amazes me, because even if it seemed like it's so stupid, even if it seems lazy, there's actually so much thought and layer put into it that it's insane. Like the fact that it's like, well, why did Hachi survive or not get like imprisoned with the rest of Arlong's gang? Like, they made a point to say, like, oh, well, he made it out okay. and then it ends up turning into like this very like, and then Hachi actually becomes like super important going forward, to the point where he's actually the core escalation for Luffy to punch a celestial dragon in the face.
100%.
And it's like that setup of like there's so many layers to it, and then it's like, well, these celestial dragons, oh, like, well, they're the aristocrats of the world, and then it turns out like actually the sun pirate crest and like everything about that comes from the idea of these celestial dragons being slavers and horrible people. And man, like every time I think like the celestial dragons can't get worse, they get worse.
Yeah. And again, like we talked earlier about like nuance or whatever and craft when it comes to storytelling, right? Like you can look at it very simply and say like, oh man, the celestial dragons are bad guys. We hate them because of these reasons, right? And then the more you look into it, it is a more nuanced thing as you meet more of them, as you get introduced to more of the history of the world of One Piece. You learn that people kind of view their world the same way that we do, of this dichotomy between, okay, you're either a pirate or you're one of the celestial dragons. They're both bad for different reasons, right? And then that's kind of the narrative in the beginning. And as time kind of progresses, you learn, oh no, it much like in the real world, there are shades of gray everywhere, that there are pirates that care about people. There are pirates trying to make, the world a better place. And at the same time, there are some celestial dragons that are pure evil, but there are some that are willing to make a change. It's just the fact that they might not have the level of power that is being portrayed in the main narrative. And again, it just comes down to craft. Is that he's not trying to make a false equivalency. He's really not, but he's able to kind of show this breadth of nuance that a lot of stories like can't do. You know what I mean? Like we talked earlier about Naruto and stuff, and Naruto is kind of what got me hooked on anime and hooked on manga from the start. But if you want something that manga and anime does not have, is nuance. Like maybe in the beginning before Shippuden, but like a lot of the themes they're trying to hammer home are like they're punching you in the back of the head as hard as they can with them, right? Whereas with One Piece, they'll kind of they'll ham it up, right? Like a Disney movie would, right? Do like the whole sort of kit and caboodle. But then as time progresses, they won't forget that point, and they'll just kind of elaborate on it and kind of build on it and build on it and build on it. And that's kind of, it's indicative of why One Piece is so good, is that there is nothing here that is not here for a purpose. And I think that's another huge reason for someone like me who loves narrative design, like fell in love with One Piece, because you see that the author really, really cares and does not forget.
Yeah, it's interesting because they introduced the fact that Robin can read poneglyphs like pretty early in the series, shortly after she's introduced, and they kind of like they had expresses, and then Enies Lobby kind of goes into, well, the world government's super against it, and for a long time that just kind of sits there as a narrative thread, and then it's like slowly, ever so slowly, underneath our nose, pulled along and more drawn out, and then by the time the importance of poneglyphs actually hits in the Mink or the Zoa arc, and it finally gets unraveled. Like, why are the poneglyphs so important, and why would the world government want to like keep it a secret? And we don't have all the answers yet, but we have enough of the answers at this point to know. Oh, and especially as we've gotten to know better, I think especially with the celestial dragons, it's important like to look at it and be like, well, the celestial dragons, it looks like this entire culture of like godhood that they've achieved is because they pulled themselves away from the rest of the world. And the more exposed you are to regular people in the rest of the world, the idea would be that like the more like compassionate you become. Like people, there are characters who have taught celestial dragons deep compassion. But then we've also seen, like with an example of Don Flamingo, how that didn't work out at all.
Yeah, there's not a universal cure for the problem that society faces, and I think that's a huge sort of underlying lesson that One Piece talks about, right? And they do it in this really funny meta way where, in Naruto, for example, you you'll have Naruto run headfirst into a problem, and then 90% of the time it's completely fine, right? The characters in One Piece, whenever Luffy does that, says there's nothing we can do, so we need to work on a problem from another angle, because if he doesn't fix the problem, he's going to make it worse, right? And that's kind of indicative of the entire storyline, right? Like, they've admitted multiple times in the manga that, like, Luffy doesn't have a plan, right? He's like, I want to be the Pirate King. How? I don't know. I'll do it, right? And that's why
I just have to I have to complete the grand line.
Exactly. I had these very basic goals, but I need to do this thing, right? But Luffy knows that by going there, he's not going to solve anything, right? He tries to solve small problems at a local level whenever he goes to a new place, right? But he doesn't have these grand aspirations, and he doesn't think that he's the right person to solve everything. He just wants to help out where he can, and he openly makes mistakes and kind of admits to them. So again, this is where we're talking about where, like, the nuance and the deepness comes in, the craft, right? It slams these really obvious lessons on it. Like, if you worship someone like a god and make yourself lesser, of course you're going to be lesser. You need to have faith in yourself before you have faith in anything else, right? Have faith in people, not in these establishments. But then in the same token, giving this sort of very nuanced lesson that even if we get the right people in power, that doesn't solve the problem, right? Like, that's not what it's all about. Even if we do destroy the world government, like, our big bad wants us to do, right? That doesn't help, right? We need to figure out the best solution for everyone involved, right? And again, that's not a lesson that is easily given, either like with nuance or not. So it's crazy that they were even able to do it.
Yeah, I think when you brought up when Luffy solves problems, there's on more than one occasion where it's like people are like looking to Luffy, like you've done so much, like solve this next problem for me, and he'll just like look at him and he'll just be like, do it yourself. There's moments where Luffy knows, hey, I'm gonna help you, but then there also comes a time when Luffy says, I know you can do it yourself. Do it yourself. I'm not here to take care of you. I'm your friend and I'll help you, but I'm not here to do it for you.
Which is very indicative in the current arc, actually.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what, no matter who it is, like even like children, right? Like, it's Luffy. I mean, much like the show, right? Luffy represents this character who is both completely not self-aware of what they're doing, but also extremely self-aware of what they're doing, right? Like, he knows that going around and solving everybody's problems isn't going to do anything. And we're seeing the repercussions of that sort of mindset in this current arc now, where Luffy is unwilling to help Momo during this, like, time of need, because he's like, oh no, the kid's strong. He can do it. He can figure it out. And, this is kind of a lesson that was imparted upon by his mentor, Shanks, right? So it's, again, a very not nuanced story where there's a big stretchy rubber man eating a bunch of meat, imparts this lesson of, like, yeah, it's great to have these heroes and strong people to help you, but if you're unwilling to make any sort of change, then that sacrifice, that hard work, that protection is for naught, right? And we even see that in the arc previous, like, or in multiple arcs previous with with Don Quixote, the Don Quixote arc. We see it with the what's his name, Jody Jones or whatever, Hody Jones arc. It's funny because the beginning arcs of One Piece before the time skip are all about, like, take down the big bad, and then, like, the secondary arcs are like, okay, we did it, what do we do? It really addresses the criticism of, taking out this dictator, taking out this bad guy doesn't help if the people are unwilling to change. And you see that in a good way with Fishman Island, and then in a bad way with or in, like, a neutral way, I guess we'll say, with the Dressrosa arc, and you see it in a very, very bad way in Whole Cake. So it's, again, the more you think about it, you're rewarded for it, but you're also rewarded just for enjoying it. It's the beauty of the romance of the journey, right?
Oh, 100%. Gosh, no, I'm thinking about it, like, it's interesting that the three original crewmates that we get end up having, like, actually not even that, like, there's every Straw Hat has a very basic, simple goal that they want to accomplish. that ends up taking them on this incredible journey of nuance and just absolute adventure. And I'm like, it's so good. Like, it's so good on so many levels. But I will say, so now I kind of like, we've definitely gone into like, these are amazing reasons to read One Piece or to get into it, or that why we love it. But now I kind of want to give, like, I want to do some fun questions. Sure. First off, who's your favorite character?
Oh, it's so hard.
I know. Gun to your head.
Gun to my head.
Character?
I feel like people are gonna hate me if they listen to this. Like, it's not gonna be a good answer because I'm gonna say a character that I really resonate with for like a very specific reason is Sanji. And then if I had to give a secondary, and I'll explain both reasons, is Chopper. And
I love both those characters.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. No matter what, every character is good in One Piece. There's no wrong answers, right? But I would say my top three...
Yeah, that's why I like this question.
But I would say my top three are definitely Sanji, Chopper, and Zoro. And I think they appeal to me for different reasons. So Sanji, his whole... I mean, no major spoilers or whatever. But Sanji has a lot of familial problems. He's kind of the black sheep in his family. And... you know, that's brought up a lot in the Whole Cake arc, and, you know, he has a tumultuous relationship with his father and stuff, and they come from very different eras in time and stuff. And, you know, it's funny because there was a joke when I was reading it, where before I started watching and reading One Piece, my wife was like, "Oh, you're really gonna like Sanji, I think." And I said, "Why?" And this was like at the very beginning when I really liked Zoro or whatever. And she's like, "Well, I think you two are very similar." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, and at the time I was like, this is kind of insulting. Like, this guy's like a womanizer. He's kind of mean to people. Like, he's very one-dimensional, right? And then as you kind of have the story progress, right, with like Water 7, where he kind of shows his intelligence and combat prowess, you know, showing that he's a little bit smarter than a lot of people give him credit for, you know, learning about how to cook and like taking care of people with his cooking and stuff, you know, the whole arc in the beginning when he joins the crew about like respect and like, you know, no matter who someone is, you gotta take care of them, right? Like, whether they're a bad guy or not, everyone deserves a hot meal, right? You know, that's something that I definitely resonate with. And there's also a joke that he has three brothers. I have three brothers, right? So it was like this going through Whole Cake was this weird thing of like, what, like just watching it or reading it over and over again, being like, this is too similar to what my family dynamic is. And yeah, so that's kind of like, my heart says Sanji, because he's a complicated, imperfect character that people hate for very good reasons. But like, his journey is something that I really resonate with. And it's not an excuse for his behavior. Like, he does act pretty shitty sometimes, but a part of me is like, I can get it. I can understand it, right? I can sympathize and empathize with his character flaws given his situation growing up. And then I say Chopper because, like, I just love Chopper. And he is...
Everybody loves Chopper. Chopper's exactly amazing.
But I think that, like, as someone who loves character design, like, and someone who loves narrative design, I think that Chopper is the coolest character in all of anime. Because of, again, we talked before about One Piece having this like Disney magical realism sort of feel to it, where like the rules don't matter. Like, Chopper is very indicative of that, where he is this like mascot character that is simultaneously a joke, silly character that doesn't take anything seriously, and then depending upon which issue or what part of the manga you're reading, is also simultaneously the most powerful person on the crew. So it's this weird like situation. Oh, and then he's also the most versatile, right? Like, he has all these different transformations that can happen and that are...
Yeah, the Rumble Ball is an incredible
exactly
tool.
And he's cool looking. Like, he's got a cool color palette. He has cool powers. His story when he joins the crew is very impactful. You know, it's just a win-win-win. Like, that is like the character narrative designer in me being like, okay, that's sick. I love that. And then Zoro, just because I'm a dude. I have a stupid dude brain, and every stupid shonen dude is like, oh, Zoro can slice real good. I love Zoro Slicer. And then honorable mentions, obviously, to the best duo in all of anime, which is No, I'm just gonna name the whole crew at this point. But I got a soft spot in my heart for Frankie and Jinbei, because my big boys.
yeah.
I love my big boys. You know what I mean? And Frankie is my wife's favorite character too. So we both relish in our big mafioso looking man.
Gotta love it, man. You gotta love it. Geez, yeah. For me, Zoro's always been my favorite character. Because once, like it doesn't matter what. If you think swords and slashing stuff is cool, you'll love Zoro. Because his entire personality is, if I'm not like cutting things with swords, like I'm either actually like his character's such a, for like one of the least defined characters, he has one of the most like versatile like combat methods between all three sword styles that he has, single sword, two sword, and three sword. He holds the sword in his mouth, and he at one point grows like 6 arms and 2 other heads to do a single attack that we've never seen since. And it's like, well, what was that? He has like his arc is all about him getting towards his goal, which is being the world's greatest swordsman. So we think up until right before the time skip, where he literally is willing to throw his dream away if he can make Luffy's dream a reality.
Mm.
And it's like, when did this guy go from being all I care about is becoming the world's strongest swordsman to I'm willing to give it up all for Luffy, because he's the man who's going to become the Pirate King, and I need to be the world's greatest swordsman to help him do that. And it's like, because otherwise his path is towards a single direction, towards beating Mihawk, and that's it. But for him to then go to Mihawk and beg for training from him is like, would be like, Mihawk even points it out. He goes, it's so like disgusting that you're asking me to help you.
Yeah.
When I'm the person you want to beat.
Yeah, it's very, I think it's ironic that like we talked about our 2 favorite characters being Zoro and Sanji, whereas like Sanji has like the most characterization of a lot of the side characters in the crew or whatever. But like Zoro gets like next to nothing, but the things that he gets are extremely impactful, right? Like the fact that, like you said, he is willing to risk everything and humble himself before this person who he wants, to defeat one day, right? Just so that his pirate captain can do their dream, right? Like it's indicative of, I think, his whole arc and what he represents as a character, which is, being like willing to humble yourself for a cause, and what you're willing to give up to achieve your dreams, and what you're willing to do, like the weighing the 2 things, right? Your dreams versus your ideals, right? And also there is definitely a tinge of like masculinity, like how deep are you willing to bow down before, how deep are you willing to bow down to someone, if it means, creating a better place.
Yeah. Another thing to note, I forgot to like, another important thing is like he's like I really feel like this characterization but evolution of his character starts in Moria, where he takes Luffy's pain and suffering.
Yep.
And that's such a like character defining moment for Zoro, as it like that like Zoro is willing to go the distance for Luffy, for no other reason than he's chosen him to be his captain. And it shows how much, and it also, like, there's something, I'm, like, here's the thing, you point out that narrative thread of Sanji, like, in Skypia, doing the, you can't trust family, that stuff. I'm now wondering, what is the narrative thread for when Zoro says, like, when Usopp chooses to leave the crew, and then has to, like, he can't just come back and say, like, everything's fine. I'm wondering now, is there going to be a narrative thread that we'll see from Zoro later on about that same thing. Like, you can't just like come back like everything's fine. Like what? Because this is another thing. Zoro's backstory is the least developed of all the Straw Hats.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that like he gets next to nothing,
like,
but is somehow the most defined character. Whereas like Sanji gets so much, and yet to me, I feel like he is so much. He's less defined than Zoro is, right? And I think it's this weird dichotomy between the two of them that I think really allows the other one to shine, right? Whereas like even though we learned so much about Sanji in the Whole Cake arc, right? He ironically is very, very nuanced, and I feel like we still don't know a lot about half of the things that he does. Like, he's a headstrong guy. He cares about people, but it comes off the wrong way. Like, he's smart, but he's single-minded, right? Like, we have all these traits that are almost contradictory for Sanji on one end. And, like, what does that mean for him, right? And then we have Zoro, who is all of those traits that I just listed, right? Like single-minded, cares about people, but you just remove all of the other parts of it. Like he cares about people, period, right? He doesn't kind of show it in the wrong way. He's just very rigid, right? So you have this person who is hard to lock down and someone who is very easy to lock down with their traits. Someone who has lots of characteristics of their backstory. Someone who has next to nothing, right? And yet we kind of see them as like equal and opposite pairs, like yin to yang almost. And I think it's kind of like I like to speculate about like what these different characters mean in conjunction to Oda as a person and like what he thinks about the world and what he thinks about people, right? And, you know, when you look at a lot of the male characters and what they represent and their relationships, a lot of their relationships are with like father figures and stuff. And, you know, whether that means like rebelling against them or what have you, that you could definitely extrapolate that as like someone who is into psychology and analyzing stuff. And you could make an argument or whatever. But I think my favorite relationship to analyze in the grander scheme of One Piece is the Sanji versus Zoro sort of relationship, because it represents, I think, two opponent pairs of masculinity, and I think that I don't know, like there's so much to think about when it comes to those two characters and what they mean for the average like man reading One Piece and growing up with it, right? Like if you read One Piece back in the day and you saw Sanji, kind of like what I did, right? And I was like, oh, this guy's a womanizer, right? He's kind of a shithead, you know, he's kind of like not a good guy. And then in that same arc that he's introduced, he's willing to break all the rules of his entire life to feed this guy who ostensibly doesn't deserve it, right? And you know, he's unwavering when it comes to his morals of like, hey, listen, everyone deserves to be taken care of, right? With a hot meal, right? And the more you learn about Sanji, you're like, okay, I get this, right? There's a reason why you're not perfect, right? And there's a reason why you're rigid, right? With Zoro, we get that same thing without the backstory, but I feel like I don't need to know the backstory for Zoro. I feel like I just get him as a person.
Yeah.
And it's like this weird sort of juxtaposition between like, I feel like Sanji represents like guys in our age demographic where like we are flawed. We have a lot of baggage from like, you know, our fathers and stuff like that. And like, we are complicated. We're not one dimensional. We do the wrong thing sometimes, but for the most part, it's from a good place. Right. And then you have like Zoro, who I think represents like maybe our parents' generation of like these stalwart, unwavering, you know, idealistic people, right, that are willing to take the pain of others, but refuse to take credit, you know, like this like sort of stoic sort of thing. And I think the reason why we don't get a lot of backstory for Zoro is because everyone knows a Zoro because it's like your grandpa or your dad or your uncle or whatever. You know, these like hardworking people that just want to get better at something. Like they are very single-minded and they just want to help people, right? But they'll never take credit for it, right? Yeah, I don't know. I just went on a long diatribe about it, but I think you could do that pretty much for any character in One Piece, right? You know, you could talk about Nico, Robin, and Frankie with trauma, right? Like the transformative properties of trauma. You could talk about, you know, Chopper and the idea of what it means to be human, right? You could do, you know, Luffy and...
that's one.
And you could do Luffy and the idea of freedom, right? Like, what does it mean to be free and at what cost or whatever? And like again, the list goes on and on and on.
And what his family
What
mean?
his family
Like,
exactly? Because Luffy doesn't
yeah,
even know his dad.
like
He doesn't like his grandpa. You know what I mean? So it's very
Uh, yeah, no, well, for Luffy, it's like it's not even that he didn't know his dad. He actually asked his grandfather, like when Garp is introduced, and he says, "Oh yeah, like Luffy, I should probably tell you about your dad." And he looks at Garp, blank, like total innocence, and says, "Oh, I have a dad." Like, like what? Luffy, it's a combination of naivete and innocence, but it's also like to Luffy, Garpa's grandpa, Ace and Sabo are brothers, and like that's his, and Shanks is like his hero and idol. That's his family unit to him, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
He's never questioned. Like, I think it's interesting is that like especially in Naruto, it's a great comparison. Naruto's like, I don't have parents, and Luffy is at a place where he's like, oh, I have parents. Huh. That's a
Weird.
concept I hadn't really thought about.
And it's funny when you see the like because they came out I think roughly around the same time, right? Like the early late 90s, 2000 or early 2000s or whatever. And it's funny to see.
No, 1997's the year both came out.
Same
One Piece
year.
and Naruto
Damn,
debuted.
wow.
Same year.
But it's funny.
They were in like that's why they're the contemporary. Like, it's so crazy how many quote unquote contemporaries One Piece has had as a series.
Yes.
Because it's had Naruto, it's had Bleach, it's had Death Note, it's had like name any
He's got everything. But it's funny that you mentioned the Naruto comparison with the parents thing, because I've never thought of this before. But like the inciting incident, the reason why Naruto is even Naruto is because of his parents, right? And it's a huge focal point for the series of him being kind of isolated and separated from people, right? And it's funny that when you look at Luffy, that moment where he brings up his parents or whatever, I think it's at Eni's lobby when we meet Garp for the first time. He's like, "Oh yeah, cool." But like, it's almost like it wasn't purposeful, I don't think, but like it's almost this comical thing of like these hard like history points that a lot of people care about and people cared about back in Naruto, right? Like One Piece kind of stared at the camera and is like, I don't care, man. Like this isn't what we don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Which was awesome, you know.
We're bringing up Luffy's dad being Dragon now because it makes sense why Dragon interfered at Roguestown, and then it also is like it will come up later as a point of importance, but for right now it actually doesn't matter because in about 2 pages Garp is going to be throwing cannonballs at Luffy.
Yeah. So. And it's funny that you say it that way, because a lot of times One Piece will like stare directly at the camera and be like, "Hey, you know this thing you care about? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all." And like you'll look at and
hey, you want the Will of D? You want to know about the Will of D?
Yeah.
Hey, Goldie Rogers talking to Whitebeard. "Oh, you want me to tell you about the Will of D and like where One Piece is?" And we're all like, "Yes." And Whitebeard goes, "Don't care."
Yeah. It's almost like a self-parody to a certain extent, because it's like there's a point as well in the time skip where I think Silver's Rayleigh is talking to Usopp and Luffy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, do you want to know what the One Piece is?" And then he's like, "Oh, yeah, I do." And then Luffy punches Usopp in the back of the head and is like, "No, why do you think we're doing this?" And like it feels like a stare at the camera moment of like, if in case you guys didn't know, the One Piece is a plot device, and literally it doesn't matter. Like, it is a vehicle by which we play this game, but it is not the game, right? To the point where I think I talked about it with somebody recently about like, what if the One Piece was nothing? I'd be like, I actually expect it to be nothing. I expect it to
It's Joy Boy's final gift.
Yeah, but I'm saying that like if it was literally like a letter saying, "Hey, what's up? It's me, Joy Boy." And then it was like a small note, and that was it. I'd be like, yeah, that tracks, because that's not the point. And I think that's a lot of times, a lot of manga are afraid to kind of introduce these things or whatever, because they're afraid that if they don't have this amazing like reason and backstory for it, people are gonna get mad, right? And Oda is so confident, and like the story that he has built up for so many years, he's so confident with, that he'll literally stare his audience in the face and be like, hey, I know what you guys want. You'll get it if you get it. And if you don't get it, then I don't care, in a very respectful way. Like he's in the best possible way. And it's great, you know?
Well, you get, like, there's the only clue we have about it is that when Gol Roger and his crew got to Laugh Tale, saw what it was, laughed, and that's why Roger named the island Laugh Tale.
And said it's not for us, it's for somebody else.
Yeah, he's like, this treasure is for somebody else. But like, people assumed that what Roger was found was so incredible that they built up the mythos of the Pirate King into this thing, and in reality, it was a bon voyage for Roger, because Roger was dying.
And that's
and
I
so
about that, but yeah, you're right.
He's like, it was literally a what's that movie? It's like a movie with like Robert De Niro and a bunch of old dudes where they go to Vegas.
Oh, I forget.
It's basically that. Yeah, it's basically that movie, but instead it's like this massive pirate journey of like, hey, let's find out, let's solve one more mystery before we go. And it's interesting that you brought up Rayleigh talking to them, because Rayleigh looks at Robin and says, Robin, I could tell you what is there, because I also read poneglyphs. However, I really want to know what your interpretation of it is. As somebody who like has the background that you have, who's been studying poneglyphs for such a long time, for the kind of crew that you have, I want to know what you guys interpret from what is there, and if it'll be different from what we determined. And to me, that's like, okay, that adds such a incredible layer to what is actually there. And like the fact that, okay, also the 4 poneglyphs give you 4 markers that then make an X, and then at the center of the X is Laugh Tale. Like that entire idea, like it's like X marks the spot. Like, geez, Oda, like you brilliant man.
Triangulation to make a point. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it's so good. Like but like the idea, like like One Piece as a treasure is a vehicle to get us there. But I do feel like, personally, I do feel like there will be some sort of cathartic payoff, whether it's, it's like emotional, whether it's just like, well, the journey was like the whole point was the journey to get here, whatever that is. It could even just be a note from Joy Boy saying, hey, aren't you guys a bunch of idiots who decided to like follow this? Guess what? There's no treasure. Ha ha, Joy Boy. Like, it could totally be that, and I'd be okay with it, because whatever it is, it's about getting there is the point of it. And that's something that like One Piece drives home so hard, is wherever you're going, like that could be important, but what you do to get there is so much more important. And it really puts all the other, like, it's about the journey, not the destination stories kind of to shame. Like, gosh. Okay, so then we got here from talking about what your favorite character is. I did not expect, like, I should have. Knowing you and I, we definitely would have got, like, we've gone off the rails so often. I'm not surprised. So my favorite character is Zoro, because, of course. Let me ask you a question. And this is, like, but if you're listening to this far, I know we've definitely been laying out some spoilers for you, but how do you feel about, because how do you feel about Shusui being replaced with Enma in Zoro's lineup?
Oh, I'm not a huge like, I love Zoro, but I'm not like a Zoro stan. So it didn't really affect me as much. But I feel like, again, with where we're at in the story, I'm not surprised that Zoro got a new weapon to his arsenal. And I'm sure that Zoro fans are very happy.
Yep. I'm mixed.
Oh,
though.
okay,
That's
okay.
The thing.
Tell me.
Because Ryuma bequeathed Zoro Shusui after Zoro beat him in a fight. That's my holdup on it. Is like, it was one swordsman passing off the sword to the next swordsman in a very like cool swordsman-esque way. And then for them to be like, oh, we actually need to take that sword away because it's Wano's treasure or whatever. Like that, like, Also because the dude who took it away is such a little like beehole. I hate him.
Well, I mean, also I feel like another part of that is like it's indicative kind of Zoro can hear his swords, right? He has this deep connection with his swords to the point where almost they're like their own characters, right? So to me, it kind of has this greater meaning of like, kind of like we were talking about before about like, it's not the journey, it's the destination, right? It's not the sword, it's the swordsman, right? So the fact that this sword, if we're considering it to be like alive, right? The sword's rightful place, its rightful home is Wano. So the fact that it was returned back to Wano, I feel like is a good arc for the sword. And then also, in a weird sort of Bushido sort of way, Zoro giving up this sword to return home only to be rewarded karmically by getting a sword that is 10 times stronger, right? To me, I feel like tracks very much with the, so the overall like vibes I get from Zoro and his arcs,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I actually came around on it in a recent like rereading, and because the anime recently covered this part, is that Shusui noticeably is a black blade. And as we learned in Wano, when a sword has had enough hockey put into it by a single owner, it actually turns the blade permanently black. And so when the guy who took Shusui away said, like, Ryoma used it so much and put so much of his soul into it that eventually the blade, like, perma-blacked, basically. And Zoro realizes, well, hockey does that, so what does that mean? And then for the idea, and then it was confirmed by the swordsmith when he said, Enma hasn't blackened yet, which means, but it's at the same level of strength, if not stronger, than Shusui, in your hands. So if you can blacken Enma, if you can tame Enma, because Enma has a unique property where it literally will suck hockey out of a user, which is perfect because Enma is the king of the underworld, the guardian and king of the underworld, and it's perfect for like the name and everything is perfect for it, and like for that, like, so if he blackens the blade on Enma, he will actually not only have a better sword than Shusui, but he will have surpassed what skills he could have had as somebody who wielded Shusui. So I actually recently came around to it. For a long time, I was real butthurt about it.
I mean, hey, and that's the thing is that with this show, like for how long it's been going on, for how long that we've been invested in how much we care about these characters. I'm not surprised when people are upset about these air quotes minor things. You know what I mean? Because it's a big deal.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah. So that just kind of covers characters. I kind of want to like postulate a little bit with you here. Like we will have all the answers to these questions at some point, hopefully in the near future. But when you look back on things like overarching long-term like plot threads, whether it's the will of D, whether it's, we now know the straw hat in of itself has some sort of significance, whether it's, the truth behind like the Black Century or the Dark Century, like what of these grand mysteries of One Piece do you think is your favorite, or one that you particularly resonate with?
If I'm being honest, like none. You know what I mean? And it sounds goofy because like I don't. Like, I think maybe if you asked me this at the beginning of the show, I would be able to give you an answer. But the fact that, we were talking earlier about how, like, Oda kind of has been saying this whole time, like, guys, it doesn't matter. It's fine. You know what I mean? That's kind of, it's slowly how I'm starting to feel, right? Like, I care more about these minor stories and stuff and these minor things that the characters are going through way more so than, like, the will of D and the will of this and, the Void Century and stuff like that. Like,
Void Century. Thank you for correcting
it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, like I care more about like, hey, does Usopp ever meet up with his dad? Like, what is that conversation going to be like? And does Luffy ever meet up with his dad? What's that conversation going to be like? Right? Is Fishman Island going to be okay? Like, things like that. But like in terms of the overarching narratives, like, as much as I care about them, I do care about the will of D. Like, what does that mean? What does inherited will mean? Right? It is something that I care about for sure, but it's something that I don't take precedent, until it's mentioned, right? It's like one of those like invisible things that the more you care about it, the less special it is, if that makes any sense.
No, I totally understand that. I don't know, like, once again, inherited will, like, what does it mean to, like, the idea of what's passed along? Like, I feel like that's more of a, like, I know that it's a very quote-unquote real thing in One Piece, but I feel like that's such a, like, to me that one resonates a lot more with me because I love the idea of, like I mentioned earlier, like, why is Shusui so important to me as, like, as part of Zoro's character? It's because it was Ryoma's will that the sword be passed on to him. Like when the sword, like, and then for like the nation of Wano to be like, no, it's our treasure. It's like, but between Ryoma and Zoro, it's like it's such a more personal thing, and the idea of inherited will. But then the idea that like also Shusui was the sword that I just realized Shusui was also the sword that Zoro used the most post time skip. And for him to lose that, it's also like, is he now losing like this crutch that he's had for such a long time? I just had that realization. I'm like, it probably
is. You gotta grow up. You gotta sacrifice things. It's funny that you talk about the will of D because it reminded me of a there's a concept in Hebrew and in the Jewish religion called Lador Vador, which means from generation to generation. And it's this thing that comes up a lot. In the Jewish religion. I'm Jewish. I'm saying it like very third person, like, but it's this thing of like people who've been through a lot, people who've suffered a lot, tend to always have this focus on like passing things down, not always physical objects, but also like these ideals, right? These ideas of like, hey, there's not many of us left. Keep this idea in your heart. Always think about it because it's important to us, right? And that, to me, we're talking about the will of D and stuff like that. I think is what the will of D is, and that's why like the idea of it resonates with me so much, like the idea of freedom, right? The idea of smiling, the idea of moving on and moving forward, right? Again, there's no confirmation that these are what the will of D is, but like to me, even if the answer is the will of D is blank, for me the will of D is like that same concept of no matter what it is, it's the idea that someone cares enough to pass it on from generation to generation. That is enough for me to really resonate with the idea. And I think that's kind of, to go back to what you were saying earlier, like the ideas and concepts in One Piece are more important to me than the answers, because of how strong they are. And I think that's why I kind of am like, if we never get an answer for One Piece, it's all good. If we don't get an answer for Will of D, it's all good for me, because I think that the concepts are stronger than their answers. Oh,
I agree. I 100% agree. I think that people have been trying to like postulate it's funny because whenever people like bring up the will of D, especially in like YouTube videos, it always ends up just going to be like, well, we need to look at the family, that like the people who carry the D initial, and like what they have in common. And I'm like, I don't think that's really what it is. It's like, sure, you can say like they all have these common traits, but at the end of the day, this is a story about a young man, a young rubber boy who wants to do what he wants in the world. And it's interesting because Garp's the same way as Luffy, because Garp literally stayed a vice admiral for his entire career, because that way he didn't have to answer to the celestial dragons. He could do whatever he wanted.
It's about freedom, but like a different level.
It's about freedom. Yeah, it's the idea of like, it's about freedom, doing what you want, but at the same time being good to one another. And yeah, no, when you brought up that, I'm like, there's several concepts in Hebrew culture, like just the idea of like a mensch, or a like other stuff that are just like this ideals that are passed on generation to generation.
Tzedakah,
and like that's so important,
and taking care of the general people,
Yep. And like, yeah, there's so much about that, and that's so multicultural. Like the ideology is multicultural as well. Like these are great examples of it, but I love it. I love so much about this. I really only have one question for you, and like this is probably, I saved it for the end. I thought about bringing it up at the beginning, but I think it's too controversial to be brought up at the beginning.
What is it?
So 1 second here, I have to pull this up because I want to make sure I get it. We One Piece fans, if I don't get this just right,
yeah, you got it.
Like they're gonna be upset. I gotta get this just right. So, Oh no, I need the.
We're doing a wiki dive, folks.
Sorry, I should have had this. I had other stuff pulled up instead just to make sure of stuff, but all right, here we go. So this is what it is. This is the question I have for you.
Okay.
Because to this day, the anime adaptation of One Piece between Funimation and 4Kids, the 4Kids animation is adaptation is well deservedly panned as being terrible and awful. Terrible changes, like dumb stuff to like make it quote unquote kiddie friendly. But I like, there is one thing that I will hold true to till the day I die, and I want to know about your opinion. Who does the intro to One Piece better? Is it the correct translation from Japanese that like what Funimation uses? Or is it in fact, what is my opinion, a superior version, which is the 4Kids introduction? And I'll read the 4Kids introduction to you.
Okay.
There once was a man named Gold Roger, who was king of the pirates. He had fame, power, and wealth beyond your wildest dreams. Before they hung him from the gallows, these were his final words. He said, "My fortune is yours for the taking, but you'll have to find it first. I left everything I own in one piece." And if you compare that to the other version, it is, and let me go ahead and pull it up here. The translation of it is, gosh, this is annoying, because I'm like, I want to know about this, and it's like, what if instead we didn't like give you a quotation of it? What if instead we gave you like a description of what it means? Anyway, oh, you know what? Here, this will be easier for me actually, because chapter 1 has it, for sure has it, or not. Jeez.
Well, regardless, it is very different, right? And I think that this could be a greater conversation of the differences between the English to Japanese like translations or transliterations or whatever. And this is going to be a controversial opinion. I'll say this right now, is that the English dubs of a lot of anime and manga, I think, are good in their own way, or they're bad enough that they completely spin around to being good. So like, for example, we would never have gotten, if we only got things in Japanese with subtitles, we would have never gotten Joey Wheeler's Brooklyn accent, right? Which
Brooklyn Rage,
which then became like a staple in a lot of dubbing of like making the, you know, the tough guy Yankee character into like a Brooklynite or whatever. And are they perfect? Definitely not. Like, but I think that a lot of times the English dubs, you know, they do what they got to do. You know, they have, you know, their pluses and minuses. I mean, in general, you should probably always try and go for, you know, the default translation or default, you know, language whenever you're doing anything like this. But, you know, I have a soft spot in my heart for a lot of the English dubbing and songs for this stuff. I mean, I love the Digimon, for God's sake, and the VO in that is like both hilariously bad and amazing. So yeah.
That is true. We lived in a special time before people wanted the literal translation from Japanese for everything. Yeah. And you know, sometimes things just don't translate great overseas, and that's just the way it is. Now, would we have gotten one of the greatest insults of like all time with Kaiba telling Joey,
"You're a third-rate duelist with a fourth-rate deck"?
Duelist with a fourth-rate deck, yes. Like, would we have gotten that from like if whatever the original like Japanese translation of that, like whatever Kaiba said at that moment would have been? Yeah. Probably not.
Definitely not.
Because it's 4Kids. So it's 4Kids, so it definitely would not have been the case. But also like banish you to the Shadow Realm, that's not what is used in the
Mm-mm.
Japanese one, because it's just like, I
Yeah, it's
murder
gonna
you.
send you to hell, fuck you, or something like that. Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, go to hell,
Yeah, exactly.
motherfucker. Like, that's what it is in the Japanese. But then we got this entire idea and concept of, quote unquote, the Shadow
Yep.
Realm, and it's like, and then, like, that's just so good. Like, there's something so great about that, in my opinion. So I bring that up just because not only does it name drop, which I think is always like one of the best parts about anything in media, is when you can name drop especially when it's not something that's commonly being said, like in the show. And it's like, well, why is the show called this? And it's like name drop, and you're like, oh,
It's called One Piece.
so cool.
Ah.
Because he left it all in one piece. Oh, that's so
Mhm.
cool. And like, and in Japanese, it translates just out to like, I left it all in one place. And it's like,
Yeah.
like, listen, Funimation, I know you're trying to be, quote unquote, true to the source material, but this is one point, just one thing you could have done, is just change up place to piece. Just do that. Like, you could have just done that. You could have done that. People would have been like, you know what, we forgive you. Because as dumb as the song was, like, in hindsight, I'm just going to say it. I'm putting this out in the world. The original One Piece rap slaps.
Dreaming, don't give it up, Nami, dreaming. I never even watched it growing up, but I heard it on YouTube like a year ago, and I was like, yo, this shit goes hard.
Right? Because, like, Sanji's cooking, Chopper's doctoring. That's an actual phrase from it, and yes, I hold true to my statement. It is was it what One Piece like, here's the thing. If One Piece, Funimation-wise, like, what they've done with it, like a true like traditional, like, adaptation and translation of the show, if they had that, but they just kept the original theme song and intro, I think One Piece in English would be like the best possible product, and I would actually recommend people like watch it in English. Because A, it name drops, and B, it has a slap and rap at the beginning. Can you imagine what that rap would have turned into when they introduced Robin and Frankie or
What would it
Brooke?
turn into? We'll never know.
We'll never know. We'll never know. And like, in some ways, it's good, because the actual like 4Kids dub like version and adaptation was truly horrendous on like levels of absolute ridiculousness. Like that bordered on like ludicrous, even. Like Hempello, instead of having a gun to a little kid's to Kobe's head, instead has an intricate device that would hit him off the top of his head with a cartoon
But again,
mallet.
it has like that Disney like sort of low stakes vibe to it. You know what I mean? And I think that's okay sometimes.
Well, yeah, but until like, how are they gonna do Ace's death?
That's a
How
whole
would
nother
4Kids have
question.
done Ace's
I
death?
would love to see the answer. You know what I mean?
Like, I look at that and I just have to laugh, because it's like, of course it's the way it is. Like, can you imagine like how you would have, like, there's so much that you couldn't have done, with that. Man, no, that is an interesting topic for another time. What the One Piece 4Kids dub would look like today.
Mm-hmm.
And like how it would handle each of the arcs. That's a fun topic that like, maybe I'll explore that in an episode with you
Hell
later,
yeah.
at a later time.
I'd be down.
Yeah, we've been going for rough, like, what, hour and a half right now. So, like, that's kind of like where like we kind of talked a lot about, like, I just wanted to talk about One Piece
Hell
with
yeah.
somebody. I gotta say, so is One Piece your favorite anime or manga?
Is it my that's a hard one. It's definitely up there. Like, I would say it's definitely top 3 in terms of manga. I would say probably manga, yeah. But there are so many anime that I never read the manga for that I'm not sure how I would feel if I went back.
Or just don't have a manga adaptation, like, or like,
exactly. But
Yeah.
my whole thing is, regardless of like, and I'm also not good when it comes to like, you know, my favorite here, my favorite there, whatever. Like, I'm very much like in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in the moment right now, I would say, even if it's not my favorite, I definitely have like an immense level of respect for it. Like, it's you cannot deny its quality. Whether you like it or not is like circumstantial. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's one of the most rewarding pieces of media I've ever interacted with. Is it my favorite this week? I have no idea. I would need more time to think about all of my favorite things, but it's definitely up there. Top 3 for sure.
Got it. Like, I'm definitely within that kind of similar realm. I just thought of the question just now, and I was like, because when I think about if there was 3 series, regardless if it's anime or manga, that I would want to introduce somebody to, the first one is Cowboy Bebop. Sure. The second one is One Piece, and then the third one is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
All solid choices.
Are you a JoJo fan?
JoJo, I think, has that same realm of One Piece for me, where like I haven't finished it, or it's similar realms where I respect it. I don't know how I feel about it in its perpetuity because I haven't finished it, but I do love it. I respect it a lot. The memes are more important than anything.
JoJo. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure understood memes before memes were even a glimmer or spark in their father's eye.
Exactly. It's like the Metal Gear Solid meme, where it's like memes are the future.
Yeah. Like before memes' father's balls dropped and developed the sperm that would eventually become memes. Memes existed before then in JoJo's.
Exactly.
Adventure. So, yeah, no. Anyway, sorry. We should not get me started talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, because so it's funny. Shonen Jump early issue had a breakdown of what all the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure stuff was, because they're like, we can't, we're not bringing it to America, but we'll tell you about it. And I'm like, this series sounds amazing. And then during my web crawling days of scouring through IRC channels, I stumbled upon the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure collection, and I read that, and
it's good. It's very good.
I'll end that thought there. It's good stuff. If I can find somebody else who's a massive JoJo fan, I would be more I'm definitely looking forward to doing an episode with them on that.
You gotta do
that. I might have also introduced Trevor to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as a concept recently, and I'm now formulating ideas of what I can do to possibly drag him into the JoJo fandom, kicking and screaming. The same way I did with a lot of people did with My Hero Academia and stuff like that. So I want to beat the casual normie out of him with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
JoJo is if Naruto and this sort of stuff is Tylenol, then that is black tar heroin. You need to slowly build it up. You know what I mean?
For sure. That's why it comes in parts, because you couldn't take all of it at once. That, and I think actually if I had introduced people to it, I'd introduce them to the anime, because it's there's the anime adaptation for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is top tier, phenomenal.
100%.
So anyway, once again, we need to stop talking about JoJo. I can talk about it literally forever. No, man. So Ian, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Where can people find you? That's something I also want to talk to you about, because last time I talked to you, you were kind of doing 1 or 2 things. Now you have 8 things that you do as a freelancer.
I do a bunch.
So please pimp out all your stuff.
If you want to see any of the stuff that I do, I edit a bunch of videos for people. Go and check me out on Twitter. That's at IanWhynot, IanWhynot. I also stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. If you're into that sort of stuff, that's twitch.tv/IanWhynot, spelled the same way. I also, if you're into what I was saying here about anime, you can go and check out my podcast at A+Anime, APLUSANIME on Twitter. We just released an episode today about Chainsaw Man, so go and check that out.
Ooh, that's an interesting
series. It very
series.
much is. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Follow me on Twitter for any of those updates and things that I'm working on and things I'm editing, and yeah, that's about it. Thanks for having me on, by the way. I love talking about One Piece in any capacity. It is my guilty pleasure for sure.
Definitely, man. I know that we could probably keep talking about it, but an hour and a half of just One Piece talk is probably enough for the normies out there. And if we went any longer, Trevor would yell at me. So, you can always find me at Rev Cabot on Twitter. That nerdy site, of course. You know what I probably should have done at the very beginning is talk about our Patreon. because we have a Patreon, but at the same time, like, I'll have to put that into introduction that I end up doing when we figure out what the name of the show is. Yeah, that being said, if you like this, rate us on your favorite podcast service. If you enjoyed this, check out One Piece. One Piece, of course, you can go to, if you just Google Shonen Jump or you go to viz.com, you can always check out what they have there. Definitely, like, they have a really cheap subscription model for the digital copies.
$2 a month, man.
And you can go back and read. Yep, $2 a month, and you can read like unlimited One Piece. So it's definitely worth your, like, if this piqued your interest and you listen to all of this. First off, sorry, we spoiled a bunch of stuff for you, but I warned you.
Also, the fact that we spoiled it is not, again, we talked about it before. Knowing information does absolutely nothing for you. It's experiencing it. It's the whole circle of the podcast, of the show, of the manga. It's everything. You got to experience it yourself.
Yep. It really is like a once and multi-generational story being told. So check it out for sure. Because one day kids are probably going to learn about it in their English class or their literature class.
Hell yeah. That's what I want.
Yep. More anime in schools. Let's go. But yeah, that's it for us here. Thanks for listening. And as always, what is it Trevor says? Trevor says something about, like, be good to each other.
There we go.
Something like
be
that.
Be good to each other.
There's that. Be good to each other.
Bye.
Bye.